Let me try and show you this 3K boost here. So this is what we're boosting initially, if I do it in solo. Yeah, that sort of really present top-end clankiness there. But it becomes more apparent on how important that is if we bring the guitars in too. Hello and welcome to this bass mixing video where I'll walk you through how to get this bass tone for this song. We're carrying on with this mixing old school emo video series, so let's get into bass. For the chorus here that you've just heard, we've got two parts. We've got the bass DI, and then we've got this big low end track that I've added there too, and they work together. So let's take a look at this DI first. With all plugins bypassed, it sounds like this. And that is the DI from this punk bass instrument here from Submission Audio. If you've seen my other videos, you know I always like to use this. And I believe it's sampled from a Mark Hopper's signature bass too, which is cool. So right off the bat, we're going to compress the DI. And this isn't really to smooth out the playing because I programmed it pretty consistently, especially for this part. This is to get some vibe, attack, and bring the bass up front. We're going to compress harder once the tone is in there, but for the DI, we've got it sounding like this. So you can hear there how much more upfront it is. There's not actually that big of a spike in level, but it sounds louder, hence the compression. And we've got this release here whacked up as fast as we can, and the attack dialed in to be quite slow, so that we're getting that pick attack through and that transient, and then the fast release is really pushing it forward and making it sound aggressive. 4:1 ratio here, but we're only compressing the DI at this stage. And we have the actual tone of the bass, which is coming from Parallax here, which is from Neural DSP, an amazing bass plugin. And the way this works is it splits it up into low, mids, and high. We've actually got the distortion of these mid and high turned off completely because I want that clanky top end that we're going to get from this, but without any distortion or anything sort of nasty happening. It's not that kind of song. And then we hear the compression. We're compressing the low end of the bass there, which, you know, you typically do with multiband compressors, etc. And then a bump here on the EQ at 500 Hertz. If you've watched the guitar mixing video for this song, you'll see that I cut around here on the guitars. So it's nice to push it on bass and sort of slotting them in together in that mid-range. This is what we have here. It's clanky, it's got a bit of dirt, and we're adding some weight with that low-end compression too. And you're more than happy to steal these settings if you have parallax and you have punk bass and you want to use this. Take a screenshot, however you want to do it. Okay, and then after that, we go into some EQ. And then this looks strange, but you got to do what you got to do, right? So for these colorful parts here are dynamic EQ moves. So we are dynamically controlling the 300 Hertz area to get rid of some of that sort of part of the bass that loses its definition. And the more you cut there, you actually find the more weight and low end of the bass comes in. I cut around 700 Hertz, so we've pushed it at 500 and we're bringing it away at 700. And then we've got a bit around 1K where it gets kind of clanky again. And then these two are controlling that sort of razor blade sharpness that you can get from bass, DIs, and especially the punk bass in general. We're not killing it, we're just reducing it. And that's an important thing to remember. Bringing it down, we're not getting rid of it. I'll take you through each one of these EQ moves so you can see, hopefully see why I made them. So you can see with those top three, the top two were quite nasty sounding, so we're reducing that harshness. And then the 1K had that strange sort of honkiness to it, so bringing that down will increase your clarity of the bass. And let's listen to these two sort of lower down ones. Yeah, again, some of that sort of honkiness, you'll hear that quite a lot in metal bass actually get pronounced, but that's not what we want in this scenario. And then this 300 Hertz one here. Yeah, you can hear on that third note how much that 300 was causing a problem. So having this set as a dynamic EQ point is reducing it and then really kicking in when that note happens. If you look on the equalizer and have a listen, that third note it goes to in this chorus really jumps up in this area. And that would start to eat up other things in the mix. So it's important if you want an even bass tone, especially down the low end, that you control these kind of resonances that pop out with certain notes. So have a look on this third note here. You'll see it jump up in the 300 Hertz area. Yeah, so we're stopping that sort of honkiness jumping out when that note happens. Let's hear this EQ off and on. So yeah, you can hear obviously when the EQ's not engaged, the bass jumps forward, but it's in those areas that are actually going to cause us issues in context of the whole mix. And you can slightly hear more low-end presence appear when the EQ is in, even though we lose that mid-range volume, if you will. When that's gone, the low end kind of has a bit more room to breathe. Okay, into a C4 multiband compressor. And this is a cool trick. I would implore you to steal these settings if you have a multiband compressor or you actually have the C4 from Waves. And that is the low end from 128 down, being compressed as you normally would with a multiband, hitting that low end, keeping it in its place, and then giving it 5 decibels of gain here to make sure that it's compressed and even. But this is the cool bit here. It's only a small little band, so 128 to 250, but look at this, it's whacked all the way down. It's really hitting that hard. And that is allowing that low end to breathe and keeping that sort of more honky, higher up parts of the bass in place. Okay, and then into soothe. Okay, so this is controlling the sort of pick attack noise and razor bladey sort of harshness that can happen from compressing punk bass and then giving it a bit of distortion. I don't want it to be too nasty, so this is what this is doing here on soothe. It's obviously not working too hard, but it's just controlling those areas. So yeah, subtle as you heard there. If I use the delta, we'll hear exactly what we're actually taking away. Yeah, nothing pleasant there, but we're just taming that. We're not killing it. And then into some EQ. So we are rolling off everything above 4.5K. These are very gentle slopes on this plugin, but still not utilizing anything above that range. I like to play with this depending on how clanky and present I want the top end of the bass to be. And then quite a significant 3 decibel bump here at just over 3K. And that sort of brings that clankiness through the guitars. So we're bringing some more weight back here with a just over 200 hertz boost to help the smaller speakers. We're actually going to tackle that with some plugins later on. And then we're pushing a low shelf here, 100 hertz, quite significantly too. This song is a bit slower than what I usually mix with the pop punk stuff. So there's a bit more space and room to push the low end up to get more, weight from it. It's that kind of tempo. So let's hear this EQ off and on. Yeah, you can see we're taking the elements we want and just bringing them out. Let me try and show you this 3K boost here, and then we'll bring in the guitars and hopefully you can hear how it pushes this part of the bass through. So this is what we're boosting initially, if I do it in solo. Yeah, that sort of really present top-end clankiness there. But it becomes more apparent on how important that is if we bring the guitars in too. Yeah, so hopefully you heard there, without that 3K boost, you're losing a lot of that bite and aggression from the bass, which is sort of giving the mix its vibe. And then some compression again, same sort of settings, fast release, slow attack. This will add to the previous compressor because compression is cumulative. And then into some last minute Pro Q3 resonance control here. This will be another late in the game move when listening when on different speakers and stuff. We're just controlling a sort of really wide band here, 117 hertz. And that would just be something specific to the song that I noticed after listening to it loads, that it was just poking out a little bit. Okay, moving on to this big low end track here. And this is more of an amp sound, which is just coming in for the big parts and the choruses to give it an extra dimension. So EQing the DI in the same way as before, because it's the same DI copied and pasted here. But this is where you start to change things. We're going to go with an Ampeg rather than the parallax. This will sound more like a full amp sound. And I'm using the one from Plugin Alliance, but there are so many Ampegs out there. They all pretty much will do what I'm using them for here. Let's have a listen. Yeah, clean, big, and well-rounded is basically what I was trying to get out of this. The two of them together, and then I'll mute this big low-end track and bring it back so you can hopefully hear what it's adding. Yeah, it really increases the size of the bass. And bringing that in for choruses has a huge effect on the journey of the song. So we're using the normal channel 2, and we just push the bass up a little bit here. And this is just a compressor that comes in with the bass. But again, it was part of the preset, this low-end preset I used here. Nothing wrong with using presets, I'd like to add, if they work for you. And then it was just better with it on than off. Okay, into some EQ. That sort of 300 area again, just making sure that it's now, because we've added this track in, it's not going to start building up, and it was. So we brought that down a little bit. And then some sort of 4K. This amp has a lot of that sort of like spiky 4K stuff. So we brought some of that down too. And then very, very important, if you're going to use 2 bass tracks together, is to make sure that they're phase aligned. You don't want adding it in to make the low end smaller, which can definitely happen if you're using different plugins or settings. So we've got the phase flipped and pushed back 3.51 milliseconds, and that would have been given us the best phase correlation. Hopefully I can show you how important this is. If I mute it, you should hear the low end change. And when I bring it back in, it should lock in place. So much more low end when this phase alignment is on. When I bypass it, that low end just disappears. Without this phase correlation, you try this trick, go, oh no, it's making the bass worse, and not use it. Whereas if you use something like this, where you align the phase, you can get quite creative without being limited. Okay, into another EQ. And then here, dealing with some low end issues that would have arisen from having 2 bass tracks. So we're pulling back some areas that would have been overpowering on certain notes. That's why they're dynamic. Let's check those out. Yeah, targeting the rumble there. We're adding some really cool rumble, but obviously it needs to be controlled. Hence what we're doing here. We're not killing that. We're just reducing it down so that we can keep it under control. And then limiter. So we used a compressor on the main bass tone. This one we're limiting because we want to keep this one in place. This is to add the extra size. This isn't the actual full performance of the bass. Okay, so it's nearly coming together. These two go through a bass bus, and let's get into that now. The first thing I did was nonlinear summer from Waves. If you've seen my other videos, you know I love this plugin. This is saturation. This is to make it sound a bit more analog, less digital. And this mic setting here really does a nice thing to the low end in most situations. So let's hear this off and on. It'll be subtle, but the low end will definitely get saturated and feel bigger when this is engaged. Yeah, subtle saturation there, sounding a bit more analog, and it's definitely adding something to the low end. Okay, now this one is the JST Bus Glue bass, and this is cool because it compresses the low end and the top end of the bass separately with a view to it being on the bus rather than individual tracks. So we've got it set to low and high. The amount of compression is at 35, mix 100, and then we're making up for the reduction in volume with the output. Let's listen to this. Now, hopefully you heard not much there because it is subtle. It's only supposed to control those elements separately. And actually, if you listen, you can hear that sort of low end pin in place slightly, but it's important when those notes start to jump out and stuff, especially when it gets to mastering. This will keep that under control and cause you less problems. It's more of a utility, but it's cool. Okay, so earlier I mentioned about making sure the low end was felt on small speakers. There is no plugin that can do that better, in my opinion, than the R-Bass, but you've got to be careful because this can get kind of crazy. For me, I have to set it differently on every single track. It's not something I can fit into a template. It just seems like the amount and the frequency is always changing. Obviously the frequency because of the key of the song, but the amount is just always varying hugely. Sometimes it's down -11, -12. This time it's only -3.5. But if you're listening on small speakers, hopefully this will be even more apparent just how much this can do. Yeah, so much weight is added there. And in fact, this song would be quite thin and tinny without this. If you can find a way to get this into your mixes without it sounding way over the top and blowing up your mastering limiters, then it's really important. Okay, so into an EQ to affect the whole bass tone. And we're just dealing with more low-end stuff. After the R-Bass came in, obviously, then we're going to have a little bit of issues with some of the sort of rumble. So we want to bring that R-Bass in and then just refine what we've done. Got a slight dynamic shelf here, pulling out some of that low end, and then we're dealing with that rumble like before. Into a limiter, this is limiting all of the bass tracks together. Now we'll just be keeping it in place at -4 there. And then the gain is just so once you automate any volume changes, I then just stick them on a gain one like this. So I did my automation and thought, no, there's a bit too much low end coming through. Hence why the gain was chucked on there late in the game just to bring it down a little bit. So if you want to give this a go yourself with these multi-tracks, you can grab them from my Shopify store or from YouTube Shopping. The link will be in the description. If you want to see how I went about mixing the guitars to this song, you can check this video out here or check out my channel for all kinds of mixing stuff on pop punk and emo, etc. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.